David Coombs qui va nous expliquer exactement qu'est-ce que le Roundup ou le Vision Max fait soit aux plantes, aux animaux, puis s'il y a vraiment un lien, à son avis, sur le cancer et aussi sur l'épandage de glyphosate. Mr. Coombs, are you there? Dr. Coombs?
I'm here, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Mr. David Coombs, what exactly is Roundup?
Roundup is a chemical formulation of an herbicide. The main ingredient is called glyphosate. It stands for glycine and phosphate, so glyphosate. And it is combined with many other chemicals to make it penetrate plants so that it can act on the plant biosynthesis.
So why do we use Roundup?
Roundup was introduced in the 1970s because it has it affects a pathway in plants and in microbes and bacteria that does not exist in humans. So it's called the shikimate pathway, and it is responsible in plants and in microbes for the synthesis of 3 very important amino acids that we must have in our diet. Humans don't make these, and animals generally do not make these 3 amino acids. So we rely on plants and microbes to make them for us. And so the idea was to inhibit the enzyme in plants that makes these amino acids to kill the plants. And so it was used as a general herbicide. It would kill any plant at all because all plants have the same pathway. And later on, Monsanto invented a way of, they found a gene in a bacterium that was resistant to this chemical, the glyphosate chemical. And so they were able to genetically alter plants, and many crops now are altered this way. It's called GMO, genetically modified organisms. And so they can grow these GMOs in the presence of glyphosate and Roundup without killing them because they're resistant, and all the other weeds and so forth are supposed to die. That's essentially why we use Roundup in the forests and in the fields, in the agricultural fields.
Donc, pour expliquer un petit peu ce que M. Coombs, Dr. Coombs vient de mentionner, c'est que le Roundup est utilisé pour tuer certaines plantes, mais il y a d'autres plantes qui sont résistantes au Roundup. So the plants that are resistant to Roundup, are they the plants that the human plant? That's what it is? Like,
the ones that we eat, the plants, the corn, soybeans, alfalfa, all kinds of plants that are now genetically altered to be resistant to the active chemical, so they can grow in the presence of glyphosate.
So Roundup and Vision Max, the same products?
Yes. Well, they're all basically, since the patent expired many years ago now, about 10 years ago, many other people have become manufacturers of glyphosate, and they have their own trade name. So Monsanto's trade name is Roundup, but Vision Max is another trade name from another company. I think it's from Bayer.
So what happens when we spray Roundup or Vision Max on a forest?
It kills everything. There are no plants in the forest that are resistant to it. So basically it's used as a way of killing all the plants and, say, undesirable species in a clear cut or in the areas underneath power lines where NB Power sprays excessively. They spray just about everything in the little cracks in the dams and on all the St. John River dams, and they basically use it everywhere they want to kill plants. It's just generally used as an herbicide, and it's excessively used. It's a contaminant in soil and in water, and of course in the air when they're spraying, because it does drift very badly.
So is Roundup and Vision Max good for human beings or bad?
Well, human health, this is one of the big things. The idea was that because it doesn't affect the synthesis of amino acids in humans, because we don't make these amino acids, we have to use plant and microbial sources in our diet. So corn and stuff and soybeans will have these 3 amino acids when we eat them. So it was thought to be kind of a silver bullet where there was no effect on humans because we don't have the enzyme that this chemical inhibits.
Which at first view, the way you explain it, yeah, okay, so it doesn't do nothing to humans.
Right. And then the problem was that what's funny, because when you think about drinking a chemical which is supposed to be harmless, and you die within hours. This is what happens. If people take the pesticide and they drink a gallon, a glass of it, they would be dead within hours, and it would be a very agonizing death. It tells you that there are other things that this chemical does to cells, human cells, and that's the part that everybody is sort of forgetting about. There's been such a kind of a love affair because it does kill plants very efficiently, that nobody really cared about what the effects on human cells were. Now, of course, it has to go through extensive testing to be approved by the EPA and the Canadian EPA and the world's EPAs everywhere in every country. And in the beginning, Monsanto was required to do all these tests, and they showed very low toxicity in animals. So you can feed an animal thousands of milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and finally it will kill the animal. LD50 is the concentration people talk about.
So it will kill the animal.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, in doses where you would have to literally, it's the same thing as I just said about you drink the stuff straight. If you fed it to an animal at high levels, there's no animal that can survive it. But the point is that it's a very, very large amount of pesticide that is required to kill an animal. And so they thought, well, this is great because that means it's not toxic. And it really, the chemical itself, in the short term and in long-term studies, has proven to be pretty low toxicity. The problem is then that you have to look at other effects. And I think this has been around since the 70s, and it was approved early, and it became very popular when Roundup-ready plants were GMO were made. So it's gotten to the point now where it is the world's largest used herbicide. There's nothing comes close to it.
Okay.
And so it has a very large user base, and a lot of people are making a lot of money on it. And of course, the farmers love it because it does kill all these weeds that they have to control one way or another. And so the research that was needed to prove that it was perfectly safe for all animals and plants, animals and humans in place and stuff, what has been ongoing. There's been many, many research papers, hundreds of research papers published on what this chemical does to animal and animal cells and human cells. And the one thing that I was struck by when I gave this little talk to the Council of Canadians a week ago was there's an assay called the COMET assay, which looks at breaks in our DNA on our chromosomes. And this chemical causes those breaks. This glyphosate chemical causes breaks in DNA. And when you look into what causes cancer, cancer is caused in some part, not all parts. Of course, mutation is the biggest method of causing cancer, where you change the DNA sequence. But when you put breaks in DNA, in your chromosomes, they tend to fall apart eventually and rearrange themselves so that the chromosome 21 is now hooked up to chromosome 17 in some funny way. And when you have these translocations, that means that there can be genes that should be quiet. They're promoting growth, and they should be quiet when there's no growth needed, and they get turned on radically high. So you basically say, grow, 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 and that's what cancer is. Cancer is essentially uncontrolled growth of cells. So these DNA breaks haven't been shown to directly cause cancer yet, but when you have any chemical that breaks DNA, you are asking for cancer. And there's so many other ill effects that people have now found that are showing up at very low levels. And the funny thing for me, the thing that is guiding my obsession with this chemical, is that there's a thing called the precautionary principle. In French, it's called principe de précaution. I think that's how you'd say it.
Yeah, principe de précaution.
And basically what it means is that when there's any question about the toxicity, for instance, of a chemical you're using widely, that the precautionary principle would say you should not use it. You should take the precaution of, if there's any indication of possible harm, you should not be using this stuff. And that principle was pretty well gutted by the Harper administration for all those years that they were in power. And so all these chemicals have gone through that process of being approved without really being looked at through the precautionary principle.
Okay.
So I think right now, if we were to look back at all the research that's been done recently, and places like California, Quebec, many places in the world are looking at banning this chemical because it is so widely used. It's in all our food. People who have never eaten vegetables that were contaminated with this stuff, it's in all the vegetables we eat. People who eat organic chemicals have this residue in their blood. The glyphosate residue is in their blood. So it's gotten to the point where it's hundreds of millions of tons are made annually and used annually in the world. And it's getting to the point where there's so much of it around that you can't avoid it. And it has many effects. I don't have the time to go into them here, but the idea is that it has a lot of toxic effects on humans and on animals, of course, and on things like the environment. Like in the forest, it would be the fish and the amphibians, the frogs, all these insects. The monarch butterfly has been pretty well destroyed by this chemical. So it's something that desperately needs to be looked at. And I think your listeners will appreciate that there's a lot of people in the province who are concerned about the deer population dropping radically and that the forests are being sprayed indiscriminately as we have given up our land to these large corporations to do whatever they want with. I think it's a tragedy, and I think it's very dangerous. I think we should be looking seriously at some sort of a precautionary ban until we prove that this stuff is safe, which I'm sure it's not, actually.
Le docteur David Coombs, qui est un biologiste moléculaire à la retraite avec l'Université du Nouveau-Brunswick, là, un professeur mentionnait entre autres que, à son avis, le glyphosate brise, à certains moments donnés, pourrait briser l'ADN, encourager la croissance de certaines maladies, dont a mentionné le cancer. Dr Coombs a aussi mentionné qu'il conseillait, recommandait fortement l'arrêt de l'usage du Roundup ou glyphosate ou Vision Max, comme on peut le connaître aussi, jusqu'à ce qu'on soit en mesure de prouver que non, il n'y a aucun danger pour la santé animale et également pour la santé humaine quand on fait l'épandage d'herbicides tels que le glyphosate sur les provinces, sur les forêts de la province. Dr. David Coombs, thank you very much for that explanation. Gives us a better idea of what the product is.
Sure, thank you.